Welcome to this week's episode of the Psyched podcast. I'm your host, Kaya Roman, and today I am so psyched to have Deborah Mash with us. This woman is such a pioneer. I've been following her work for many years, as I'm sure other people watching this have. I'm really, really honored to have her on the podcast today. Let me tell you a little bit about her background. Deborah Mash was a professor of neurology and molecular and cellular pharmacology at the Leonard M. Miller School of Medicine and director of the Brain Endowment Bank at the University of Miami. She is also the founder and CEO of DemeRx, a clinical stage company developing ibogaine therapies to treat substance use disorders. The thing that is so significant about Deborah is, and we'll hear her story, she really honed in on ibogaine and the incredible healing potential of this medicine. And if you've heard other episodes, I've spoken about my personal experience with ibogaine. I would say of all the psychedelics that I've experienced for research purposes, ibogaine is definitely my favorite. And I think it is so needed in the world. So I'm very excited to hear from you, Deborah, about how did you get started in this field? And then, I want to hear what you're working on next. But how did you get started? How did you even find out about ibogaine?
How did I find out about ibogaine? Thank you. Thank you so much for having me to speak with your listeners today. I moved away from the Alzheimer field into the addiction field at the height of the cocaine epidemic in Miami. So Miami was, on the front end loading of the cocaine epidemic. And we were hit very, very hard. We had, crack exposed infants. People were dying. We had a lot of cocaine related deaths.
Yeah.
We had crime. We had breakups of family, violence. Streets of Miami got very interesting very quickly. And, the whole cocaine scene changed in Miami from being kind of very trendy, cocaine champagne to something very ugly and very dangerous. And it happened very quickly. And I had joined the university and had already launched a career working on degenerative diseases of the brain, like Alzheimer's. So now this is happening, and I'm studying the human brain after death. I'm working with medical examiners, and we discovered cocaethylene. When you drink and use cocaine in combination, your liver makes a metabolite of cocaine, which we demonstrated was more addicting and more lethal. Mm-hmm. Phase 2, we get national recognition for this. We're the Miami Vice metabolite. And while I'm touring around and speaking on behalf of the Coalition for a Drug-Free America, presenting to the college on the problems of drug dependence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, a gentleman walked up to me after one of my talks and said, Dr. Mash, have you heard about this molecule from Africa that can be used to get people off of hard drugs? Wow. And he's very animated, and he was an African man.
Okay.
African man. And he's animated. He's explaining this to me, and I just looked at him in complete disbelief. I said, no, I have no idea what this is. And I say things happen in threes, right? So that was number one. I hear about it. And I was kind of rude probably to that gentleman on that day because there were so many people standing around wanting to talk to me. And I said, you know what, sir, I don't know what you're talking about, but thank you, So the next time I heard about ibogaine, I was at the College of Problems on Drug Dependence. And there was a scientist there by the name of Dr. Stan Glick, who was working on ibogaine and giving it to rats. Little rats will self-administer all of the drugs that humans will abuse. Nicotine, cocaine, heroin, opioids, etc. Alcohol, they'll drink alcohol. And he would give this African molecule to these rats and they'd stop taking drugs. Wow. Second time I heard it, I sit up in my chair and I go, that's that thing, that's that what? And I come back from that meeting and Howard Lutzoff, the late Howard Lutzoff, who made the seminal discovery on ibogaine, had called me and left me a message on my answering machine.
Wow.
Wanting to know about our work with cocaethylene. I called him back and I said, who are you? What is this molecule? How does it work? And that led me to go to Amsterdam to see it with my own eyes.
Wow. It was meant to be. Amazing. So, how long ago was that, Deborah?
Yes, that was in the early 90s.
Okay. So, you've been working with ibogaine for a while.
30 years. 1993, we got FDA permission. Here we are, 2023.
Amazing. And I just really personally thank you for your dedication to, seeing this through and not giving up because you see how much people need it. But I would love to hear, what do you think it's going to take to get ibogaine legal and safe and accessible? We have such an addiction crisis in this country and worldwide. Where are we at with ibogaine right now?
In 2017, at the height of the opioid epidemic, I had a deep crisis of conscience and a deep feeling in my heart as people were dying from opioid intoxication deaths.
Mm.
And the ibogaine journey for me has been nothing but an uphill battle. But in 2017, I said, I've got to finish what I started. And I left my academic position and took over the company DemeRx with the idea that we would have two molecules in the race for the treatment of addiction. One, the ibogaine. I would bring ibogaine back in to the clinic, to clinical trials. And also ibogaine is converted to an active metabolite, noribogaine. So if you microdose, we hear a lot about microdosing of psychedelics. If you microdose ibogaine, your body is making an active metabolite called noribogaine. And our research and the science that I had done over those many years suggested that the metabolite might have some of the beneficial after effects of ibogaine. So I said, okay, we're going to bring both molecules in. We have no time to waste. Let's go and raise funds. And that's what we did. We reorganized the company and raised funds. And in 2020, we forged a collaboration, a joint venture with ATAI Life Sciences, who generously agreed to work together with DemeRx to fund the clinical trials.
Wow.
So then you've got to, get all the work done, get the molecule. We had to get, what's called good manufacturing practice, drug supply, which we did. Now we have multi-kilograms of the drug, enough to get us all the way through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 testing. Very important, because ibogaine is not an easy molecule to get. And you can't go tearing up, Tabernanthe iboga roots out of the region of Gabon and Cameroon. By the way, Gabon just nationalized the iboga plants in the region.
And what does that mean? Is it a way of protecting the plants? I know they're endangered.
Okay. It is. It's a way of protecting the plants. And also we hear also in the psychedelic movement about reciprocity. We don't use ibogaine from the plants. We're not digging up the iboga root for a clinical trial. We have an alternative route to the molecule, also from a natural product precursor. But it's we believe, a sustainable route to the molecule. So that was very important. And of course, that costs millions of dollars to work that out. Then you need to go into the regulatory agencies and win over the reviewers to get them to allow us to do this, because ibogaine has many stigmas, including that there have been adverse events because desperate people have traveled and taken ibogaine in unsafe settings.
Right. Yeah, you spoke to me before we hopped on about the gray zone of addiction treatment. Tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, obviously, people are desperate. If they're battling addiction, they're battling for their lives. And maybe they hear about ibogaine, but yeah, what are you seeing out there?
A mixed bag. It really is a mixed bag. When I got FDA permission in 1993 and 1995, and the FDA was always extremely collaborative with me and the team at the University of Miami. Very collaborative. They want, the FDA wants to bring other molecules forward to help address various problems, of human health, but we couldn't fund it. And I didn't control intellectual property. And the psychedelics were, let's face it, they weren't in vogue at the time.
Right.
Raising funds,
Different story now.
Very different story today. Very different story today is that we've got, incredible excitement around making psilocybin a medicine, making MDMA a medicine. And yes, we want to make ibogaine a medicine.
Okay. So are you working on a synthesized compound that is patented or somehow? No. Okay.
No, we have a method.
Tell me how your compound works.
Yeah, different than some of the other areas. With most of the psychedelics, virtually all, those structures, the molecules are disclosed. So these are not novel composition of matter. When you go in front of the Patent and Trademark Office, what they want is novelty and inventiveness.
Right.
If you have a novel molecule, you can patent it. If this is something that hasn't been disclosed. But we know the molecular structure of ibogaine, just like we know that for psilocybin. But what you can get patents on, and we do have patents on the active metabolite of ibogaine, the noribogaine. Okay. There we have composition, but you can't on ibogaine. So the way that people try to protect and get a rate of return on investment for people who are generously putting their money in to support these very expensive clinical trials, is to look at either synthetic or semi-synthetic routes, so new manufacturing or new formulations of the molecule, better formulations that can improve safety, stability of the drug, impurities in the drug product itself. These are techniques for getting novel patents approved. And then also, of course, method of use. So when you get into the clinic and you begin to understand the data and the observations, then you can likely improve upon how the drug is used with patients. But this is an issue in the psychedelic field. I mean, we see this with MDMA.
Yeah.
And we recognize the success that Compass has had with psilocybin. If you're going to make it a medicine, you want to have some intellectual property around this. Otherwise, you have 5 years of exclusivity. It becomes very difficult then because others can jump in and take away from the market share.
Okay. So with ATAI then and your partnership, you guys are running clinical trials with humans?
We are.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I don't know how
Yes.
much is public information yet.
Yes, no, I can share. So the MHRA, which is the regulatory agency in the UK, has become our friends. They supported the clinical trial application. They approved us. And they have been working again, just like the FDA did with me many decades ago, working very collaboratively, because what we are doing is what's called a dose escalation. So we're walking up the doses of ibogaine, looking at the metabolism and looking at the safety profile of the drug. Why is this important? Ibogaine is a complex molecule. There is nothing simple about ibogaine. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Complex pharmacokinetics. It's under genotype, what we call a genetic regulation. So we have to genotype the patients, subjects in this case, because they're healthy volunteers, for fast, slow, and intermediate metabolism.
Really?
Why is this important?
Wow.
Oh, yes. And you know what? I reported on this many years ago. I have a paper that's entitled Ibogaine Complex Pharmacokinetics, Concerns for Safety, and Preliminary Efficacy. This was one of my publications that came out sometime in the middle 90s. Today, it's the same story. Complex pharmacokinetics. And females, we need to understand how women metabolize.
Mm-hmm.
This is a problem for women's health.
Mm-hmm.
Are women going to have higher exposures to ibogaine in the metabolite than men? How does, our hormonal regulation affect, if at all, exposure to the drug and the metabolite? Because unlike the other psychedelics, what we know for ibogaine is there's a more narrow therapeutic window.
Okay.
And we want to ensure, especially for people who have been abusing hard drugs, imagine you're coming into detox. Ooh, right. You're not well.
Yeah.
You have electrolyte imbalances, you're nutritionally compromised, you may have damaged your heart, your liver.
Mm-hmm.
You have enzyme induction in the liver, you've got poly drugs, many different drugs on board. You may not have only been abusing opioids. Maybe you've been doing, some crack with it, or benzos, taking Xanax. So you've got a complicated person. In St. Kitts, when I set up the private clinic in the Caribbean, I might mention that was another pioneering thing that I did along the way, was when I couldn't fund the ibogaine, was to go down into the Caribbean, get government approval to allow us to treat people.
Wow.
And the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, the prime minister was a medical doctor. We went up in front of them and the government approved us. And we had the first psychedelic addiction treatment clinic anywhere in the world, government approved, in the Caribbean. And there, 277 patients came through those doors and took ibogaine without an ibogaine death, without someone having to go to the hospital. We were able to treat patients detoxing from opioids, from crack cocaine, some alcoholics, some polydrug dependent patients, few methamphetamine users at the time. We were able to do it safely.
And what would you say your rate of success was, and in general with ibogaine? Can you say what a rate of success is?
Certainly. So in the 277 subjects, what was amazing, there were many amazing observations, but keep in mind now, this is not clinical data as right. It's open label.
Observational data.
It's observational data, it's open label data. But we kept people with us in residence. So we were able to, stabilize patients, evaluate them before the drug, give them the treatment, evaluate their response to the treatment, and then be in residence with them for almost another 5 to 7 days, looking at their response to ibogaine as a therapy. It was extremely effective for blocking opioid withdrawals. Patients would report, our doctors could score patients on observations of withdrawals, so the symptoms. But the patients reported to us, I feel great. I'm not sick. And Kai, what was interesting for us and for my counselors and clinicians that were there is the patients stayed. They didn't run away.
Right.
They didn't jump the fence. They didn't go off and get drugs. They completed their inpatient stay. Many patients will go into rehab or go into detox and they leave.
Yeah. And they go straight back to the drugs.
Well, and they go straight back to the drugs. Now, because our people were flying in from all different places, it was not as easy to do long-term follow-up, but we tried our best to continue to maintain, a relationship with the people that came through the St. Kitts arm, and without really having, really QC data with urine checks. At the end of 1 year, it was clear to us that more than 50% of our subjects were still doing very well. And in fact, I have people now who still stay in touch with me. The subject, my first patient into the clinical trial, SKM1, St. Kitts male number 1, texts me and is doing phenomenal. Was everyone a success? Amazing. Do people relapse? Of course they do.
Sure.
Sure. But it is no doubt exactly what Howard Lutzow said. It's a powerful addiction interrupter.
And there's nothing else, right? I mean, what else on earth can do what ibogaine can do?
It's the transformative aspect of it is also amazing. Today, what are our options? Doctors, struggle to stabilize the patient and to be able to transition them to buprenorphine, to Suboxone, and or to injectable Sublocade.
Right.
It's very difficult. It takes 5 weeks to get someone to where you can give them an injection. Many patients cannot get through detoxification. They walk out the door of a detox center, they're still sick. Why? Because even though you've treated the acute symptoms, you haven't dealt with the post-acute withdrawal, the depression, the anxiety, the deep dark funk, the cravings,
right?
The mental idea that it's just one more hit of Coke, one more line,
right?
One more shot of heroin. Just one more Percocet, one more Oxy, I'll feel normal. And it's that conditioned thought that if I go back out and get high, I'll feel normal again. No, the ibogaine does away with that.
And how is that working? It's working on some mechanism in the brain?
And it is. And I'm very humble because as a neuroscientist and someone who spent her entire life studying the brain, we don't completely understand it, but what we do know is that ibogaine and noribogaine are acting on discrete targets in the brain to reset the loop. And the patients tell us it's like a reset. And not only that, the visions, the transformative aspect of a psychedelic, the visions seem to engage the frontal lobes. They engage the frontal lobes in a way that intractable, drug users can step out of that and be able to think straight. No pun intended. Okay, they're detoxed and they're thinking straight.
So I'm guessing you think the visions are a pretty important part of the experience. Like if somebody was working on taking the vision and hallucinogenic aspect out of the ibogaine, maybe you wouldn't be a fan of that.
It's still a fundamental question. And we have my colleagues at DemeRx Pharmaceutical who are working on tabernanthalog, which is an analog of ibogaine, a non-hallucinogenic analog, which shows some of the interesting neurochemistry that has been described for ibogaine. What about noribogaine? Noribogaine is not a hallucinogen either.
Right.
So you could imagine that noribogaine, given in a pill, patch, or a depot, could be developed in a low-dose formulation as a take-home medication to keep that window of sobriety longer. Can it promote, continued abstinence? What's interesting about the psychedelics, why I am so excited about them as a neuroscientist pharmacologist, is that they turn on growth factors. The clinic in St. Kitts was called the Healing Visions Institute for Addiction Recovery. Hilarious that we named it that. And I think I was probably...
Very appropriate, though.
I think I might have named it. The idea here is that you're turning on growth factors in the brain, and you can have a restoration of cognitive function and neurochemistry. You also have the visionary experience. Ibogaine gives people very powerful visions.
Yes, I can speak from experience about that.
And you can speak from experience, but I've never taken the ibogaine, but the patients tell us.
What?
Never taken
I'm kind of shocked about that, Deborah.
No, I'm a little bit of the old school that I always wanted to maintain objectivity. And I grew up in the 60s. I've taken psychedelics in my youth. And I know, and they were powerful for me. They were beneficial for me at a point in my life when I had some deep, dark despair around the death of my father, and I was a young woman in college. They helped me, no doubt about it.
Yeah,
I understand this, But to this day, I've never taken a dose of ibogaine, and thank God I'm not addicted and I don't need it. And every dose we have is precious,
Right.
and a dose for the patient.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I just am curious if someday, even without an addiction, you might want to see what that experience is like.
I think it would be great. I think it would be great. And I'm cardiovascularly fit. So, I would love to be in my own studies.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I'm too old. I don't meet the cutoff for the inclusion, so I can't do it.
So the studies that you're running now are with healthy, non-addicted people just to assess metabolism and dosages and safety.
And safety.
Okay. And then the next round of studies will be with people that are facing addiction to look at efficacy then?
Absolutely. And
okay.
We're working with a group that has developed a novel VR technology for ketamine. And so we're going to be adapting that platform and some of the beautiful modules that they have to make them specific to ibogaine. This way we can prepare, I'm very excited about this, is to prepare patients for the journey.
Okay.
As a psychoeducation and setting and preparation. And then into post-ibogaine integration.
Fascinating. Wow. It's a whole new world.
Thank you.
Wow. That is really fascinating. So what do you predict on this journey of, working through these clinical trials, which, as you say, are expensive and extensive, but on the road to, I hope and pray, FDA approval? How do you predict that's going to roll out?
When this goes well, which we're right now collecting the top dose, the treatment dose level, we can complete this cohort of subjects, then we're ready to present our data in the next few months by the end of the quarter. Wonderful. In the UK, and then we'll follow with the US.
Okay.
If the regulators agree with the data that we're showing them, and they accept that the benefits will outweigh any risk, because ibogaine is a QT prolonging drug. It changes the cardiology of the heart.
And QT is the interval between the heartbeats.
It is. It's a refractory period of the heart.
Okay.
And there are drugs approved, which are QT interval prolonging drugs. FDA has approved them. There are oncology drugs that are QT prolonging drugs.
Sure.
This is not going to be the end of the story, but we need to understand the magnitude, and you can have a safety protocol. So it's very likely that ibogaine will be administered under, very tight safety protocols by very qualified investigators. And this is what I've been promoting my entire life. I mean, I've been talking about this for a very long time. Look, there are 70 right now active ibogaine clinics. Tens of thousands of people have gone offshore to take ibogaine.
Yeah. And
they're talking to us on Zooms. We're hearing about it on the internet, and I'm talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. We know it. We know it works. And we know that actually the adverse effects are pretty minimal in most cases, especially if the safety protocols are followed. So
if people are healthy, ibogaine is doing something in the brain that may be resetting this amazing reset that's going on in the brain. Likely, not only there are direct effects on the heart, but there's effects in the brain because you're in this transitional state between waking and dreaming. It's almost like a lucid dream. I mean, I haven't taken it, but you tell me.
Yes, I fully agree. Yes.
So when the brain is between wake and sleep, in the deep hours of sleep, you can see QT prolongation when you sleep.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's measure it. Let's understand it.
Yeah.
And let's get this drug to patients.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much for your tireless work to do that. I'm so grateful, for your dedication and your team and this incredible partnership now that you have with ATAI Life Sciences, putting funding behind it. How can people follow along and how can people support your work?
People can support us by visiting our website, and we get lots of information coming into the website. And we're also setting up a patient registry, and this will be announced later. And I probably come back to you with that information as well, because you can help promote it. But we're going to ask people that are going offshore and taking ibogaine in other places to share how it worked for them.
Wonderful.
And we believe by having our patients, our ibogonauts, become part of the scientific team, that we can gather that real world evidence to support acceleration of the clinical trial.
Oh, amazing. I love it. Well, sign me up as an ibogonaut for sure. And anything I can ever do to support your work. Thank you so much. And what is the website people should go to?
It's DemeRx.com, DemeRx.com.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Deborah Mash. It has been such an honor to speak to you. I'm so excited about the work that you're doing, and to know that this amazing compound that has the potential to heal so many people is on its way. I know it's a long journey, but you have come so far, and I feel like you're in the last legs of this journey. So I'm really excited for all the people that are going to be helped. And thank you for taking the time to speak to me today.
Yeah, thank you very much. From your mouth to God's ear.
Take care.